Full-size picture of the shroud was sent to Robert Buckland. Now, Robert Buckland was a famous forensic pathologist out of Los Angeles. He specialized in looking at dead bodies. In fact, the TV program Quincy was based on Robert Buckland. He came up with the following: an adult male measuring 71 inches from crown to heel and weighing an estimated 175 pounds. Body structure anatomically normal, representing a well-developed and a well-nourished individual. The kind of thing you would imagine Christ being. Long hair, which on the posterior image appears to be fashioned into a pigtail or a braid type configuration. There's also a short beard which is forked in the middle. Now, the only surprise there is the pigtail braid. It turns out that was very common with first century Jewish rabbis. Now, these excerpts are from the Autopsy on the Man of the Shroud by Robert Buckland. It's pretty good indication that it was a fairly hasty burial and that the body of the man was not washed. Now, there are certain conditions in first century Jewish custom that would have prohibited the body from being washed. Blood was considered to be very sacred to the first century Jews. They looked at it as their life source. And if a body had blood flowing after death, it would cause the no-no, and they would not have wanted to wash it. Furthermore, if a Jew died a violent and bloody death, or if a Jew died by capital punishment for a crime of a religious nature, or if a Jew was an outcast or murdered by a Gentile, the body would not have been washed. And all these conditions, of course, applied to Jesus. Dr. Alan Wagner of Duke University, who's been studying the shroud with his wife Mary for at least 20 or 30 years, noticed with enhanced photographs, he noticed the features of hard objects over the eyes of the man in the shroud. Again, it was customary to put hard objects to keep the eyelids closed. On the bottom, you see a coin, and the image of it is on the shroud. That coin is a Pontius Pilate coin from the year 29 AD. Above it, for the other eye, is a coin of Tiberius Caesar. So that kind of indicates that the shroud certainly was of the right vintage. Okay, gospel comparisons. How does the image of the man in the shroud compare with what we know? This is fascinating. Okay, let's take a look at what the shroud reveals and what the shrouds tell, what the Gospels tell. Number one, an apparent severe swelling below the right eye and other facial injuries. Jesus was struck with a blow to the face. And there's the references, all four of the Gospels. Apparent bloodstains on the forehead, all around the back of the head. Jesus was crowned with thorns. The body's literally covered with wounds from a severe scourging. He was scourged. Scourge marks on the shoulders look blurred, as if something heavy had rubbed on them. He had to carry a heavy cross, or in our case, a crossbeam. The knees looked like they were injured by repeated friction. His cross had to be carried, suggesting he fell. And by the way, they did find sediment on the knees of the shroud and the feet that matched the limestone from that area of Jerusalem. Another thing, I can't cover everything. There are apparent blood flows from all the nail wounds in the wrists. He was crucified by nailing his hands and feet. There's no sign of the legs were broken. His legs were not broken. And there's an elliptical wound from a lance on the right side, and that's exactly what's on the shroud. So what can we conclude from that? We can conclude that it matches the shroud. This one I call mathematical probability. And this is from a great book called Verdict on the Shroud, again, one on my list, by Stevenson and Herbernus. Okay? What they did is they listed the 8 irregularities of the crucifixion. In other words, irregularities that did not occur in most crucifixions. And they listed the odds that it would have occurred on the man on the shroud. The severe scourging, they only listed 1 in 2. In other words, they might have scourged other men. Crowning with thorns, 1 in 400. Nobody was crowned with thorns. That could be 1 in 10,000. Crucified with nails, well, every now and then they did it, 1 for 2. Legs not broken, 1 in 3. Speared in the side, 1 in 27. We don't know much about that, but it's not likely. Wrapped in a new linen shroud. I mentioned earlier, most bodies were just thrown in a mass grave. Occasionally a family would claim the body, but they used a 1 in 8. Buried in haste because of the Sabbath, 1 in 8. And no signs of decomposition. That's another thing I failed to mention. A study of the image shows that there was no signs of decomposition, which is an indication that that image was formed sometime in the first 30 to 40 hours. Again, that tracks pretty well with what we know. So if you multiply all these together, you come out with 1 in nearly 83 million that it is not Jesus.